On the ground, we built the end wall into the hoop. So we have our ridge hoop and our roof hoop installed all the way to our end wall. Right here is everything that is below this seam between the roof hoop and the sidewall hoop was not installed when we built the end wall into the hoop. So once it's up, we have to install it. The end wall itself installs to the sidewall hoop using one of the telescoping ends. And when we secure that in place, we need to make sure that no screws are anywhere on the outside surface, which will get in the way of where polycarbonate is going to go. So once we had the end wall up, as we were building our structure, we got our end wall in place, we had to make sure that the width of the door frame, because this is really the most important dimension, is where the door is going to go, that the width of the frame at the top is the same as the width of the frame at the bottom of the end wall. In this design, it's a 54¼ inch wide door, so our width from the top of the door to the bottom of the door should be 54½ inches. When we first put it up, it was a little bit wide, so when we secured the bottom of our end wall to our sidewall hoop, we had to make sure to make up that distance with the telescoping end. So after the telescoping end was in, we secured the brace band bolt, the nuts on the inside, so it won't get in the way of the polycarbonate. We put one on this side, we put one on that side. We made sure to pinch them together so that our door frame was exactly 54½ inches. Once we had it exactly where we want it, we then went and put self-tapping screws into the horizontal studs to secure the self-tapping screws to telescoping ends. And what that does is that locks in place the distance for the bottom of the door. Now that everything is up and the top of our end wall is in place, when we have the building exactly where we want it, we'll come back and we'll install our flip-up bottoms. We'll make sure that we put the same flip-up bottoms on the same sides of the end walls. We marked them when we took them off to make sure we knew which one went with which. There's also some bolts. There's 2 bolt holes that are for bolting the flip-up bottom shut. So when the flip-up bottom is closed, we put bolts in here that'll keep the flip-up bottoms closed. After the flip-up bottoms are installed, we'll use some T-posts. We'll drive some T-posts in behind it, and that'll secure the bottom of the end wall. After our flip-up bottoms are in place, we're then going to install our door with hinges, and we'll take the peak vent out. We labeled which peak vent went with this vent frame. We'll put that back up, put in our pivot bolts, and then start installing our hardware and our polycarbonate. But the first step is after you get the hoop up to make sure that you secure the end wall studs to our sidewall hoops using these telescoping ends. What we're going to talk about now is how to put polycarbonate on this end wall. When you put on polycarbonate, I like to start from the inside and work our way out. So we started with our long sheets, and we started on this edge on the 2 sides of the door. We put up a full sheet and started going out from there. The first piece, a channel that goes on, is a single H channel. There are a couple different types of aluminum that we use, aluminum extrusions that we use when we put on polycarbonate. A single H channel looks like a lowercase h, and that takes one edge, or the edge of a polycarbonate seam. The double H channel, which goes in between the sheets, takes 2 different pieces of polycarbonate. It's like a capital H so that it can fit polycarbonate from each side. There's also a single plastic attachment channel that's used for our roof plastic, and that's put on top of this flashing here, this aluminum flashing that trims off the top edge of the polycarbonate. Polycarbonate has an inside and an outside. Only one side is UV protected. So when you get polycarbonate, it comes with a protective sheet. It's important when you take off that sheet to mark which side is out. So in this scenario, it's really important that we have it out, and we also have to mark any of the pieces that we trim or cut off so that when we use them later, we also know which side is going to be out. There's also a couple types of tape that is used. On the bottom edge of the polycarbonate, we have this vent tape. It's a white porous tape that allows water to drop out without bugs getting inside. On the top edge, you can't see it because it's covered with this flashing, we put aluminum tape. That aluminum tape stops water from getting into the top of the polycarbonate. So when we sheeted this, the first thing that we did was we put a single H channel from the bottom, ran it all the way up and allowed it to go long because it gets trimmed to fit. Since this has flip-up bottoms, we had to make sure that we left room on the bottom edge of the polycarbonate for where all the hinges are going to go. After our first piece of single H was in, we then found our vertical stud, and we wanted to make sure that we lined our polycarbonate seams up with our vertical stud. We had to trim this piece slightly to get it to fit, so what we did is we put our factory edge inside of our first single H channel, and then we put our double H channel into our cut edge on the ground. So we put up the polycarbonate and the double H channel as one piece. Once we had it in place, we had it where we wanted to, we went ahead and started screwing it in. The single H channel on the flap on the edge was put in with 1-inch self-tapping screws, and the double H channel at the seams was put in using 1.5-inch self-tapping screws. Everywhere where we screw directly through the polycarbonate into the metal studs, including on the bottom edge here, and then on all the horizontal studs, we use 1.5-inch self-tapping screws with neoprene washers. It's really important when you're putting those self-tapping screws in that you don't suck those screws through the polycarbonate, because the polycarbonate's really weak and it's really easy to do that. The neoprene washers help make sure that you don't do that. But be really careful when you're screwing directly through the polycarbonate. After the first sheet was on, we then lined up our double H channel on our next vertical stud. We trimmed this piece to fit. Again, we put our factory edge into our first channel that was already up. We put our double H channel onto this piece before we put it up as one piece, screwed it in. Came over here. In this scenario, we had about 5 feet from our edge here all the way to our outside, but there's no vertical studs. So what we did, the fastest way to do it, is just to take a sheet and then rip it in half. So we took a 4-foot wide sheet, we cut it in half, giving us a 2-foot section. That way we didn't have to measure this section at all. We just cut it in half, and this piece went on this side and on the far side over there. Then what we did is we put this piece into the double H channel to get our width correct, and then we measured this piece to fit. So this was just a piece cut in half. This ended up being about a 3-foot piece, and it ends up looking a lot nicer than if you have a 5-foot piece and then a little 1-foot piece. So that's how we finished off the edge here. Because there's no vertical stud behind this, we had to make sure on this double H channel that we screwed it into the bottom of the horizontal stud, and we also screwed it into the hoop to make sure that this was done nicely. We trimmed the whole thing on the top using a reciprocating saw, put the tape on the top, put the flashing on, and the plastic attachment channel. The only thing that was left was to go through, put our sheets above our peak vents, and also put them below our peak vents. There are situations where you can use 2 little pieces of single H channel overlapped as opposed to double H channel. We're putting the finishing touches on our 30-foot wide metal end wall for a movable structure with flip-up bottoms. We already talked about how to do all the metal framing and how to sheet it with polycarbonate. Now we're putting on some finishing touches. The flip-up bottoms came for this structure pre-assembled. So what we did was we took the hinges from our flip-up bottoms, we lined the flip-up bottom in with the door, made sure that our door spacing was correct from all of our previous measurements, and then we secured our flip-up bottom to our end wall using these 3-inch narrow hinges. We put 3 sets of hinges on this flip-up bottom, and it allows it to flip up and down. The height of this allows it to go over low tunnels or allows it to go over crops that are in the ground. The only things that are left is just to hang the door for the structure and put the peak vent in at the top. If we go into the inside of the end wall, we can look at a couple more details in here. We've already put the hinges on the outside of the flip-up bottoms. There are also bolts that keep the flip-up bottoms shut. These bolts allow it to stay closed when you want to keep the building in its position. So we have a 5-inch by 3/8 by 5-inch hex bolt here. I like to put the nut on the top, that way when I take the bolt out, the washer on the bottom stays with the bolt. So we have it bolted shut here. We also have it bolted shut over here. To anchor the bottom of the end wall to the ground, we're going to drive in two T-posts. We'll put one right next to the side, right in the inside for the door, and we'll put another T-post about halfway through in the middle. When we put those T-posts in, we'll secure those T-posts to the steel studs using a 1 3/8-inch pipe strap and some self-tapping screws. That'll make sure that the bottom of the end wall is properly anchored, so any of the wind that hits the end wall is braced by the end wall. We're basically done. Just got to hang the door, peak vent, a couple posts, and we're ready to go.